I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here, Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Welcome everybody who's already here. To those who will see this and hear this later, welcome to you as well. It's always good to see and have you join me and us. Thank you very much. Jump on in and let me just, first of all, welcome Dwayne. And let me just, first of all, because I want to get right into everything. So let me just, first of all, I want to thank everybody and encourage others to join them in supporting my pinned tweet at I Mix What I Like. Please, if you would, if you haven't already, or if you wouldn't, just do it again. Go on to your Twitter account, go to at I Mix What I Like to my profile and pin tweet there and hit that. I would really appreciate it, and we'll talk more about that in due time. Thank you very much in advance, and thank you very much after the fact for those who have already done it. And again, welcome to those starting to come on in. Good to see you all again, and I hope you enjoyed yourself with the Remix Morning Show this morning, and you are going to continue to enjoy all the content as it continues to come out here at BPM. So, okay. I do want to get to this because time is a little bit short, and greeting Sugar Booger, and squeezing this in between classes and whatever. But this is actually perfect because on my way yesterday to my World According to Hip Hop course, literally in the car, get this flash heads up. I sound somber. Maybe I am a little somber. Maybe I am a little somber. I am a little somber because I got this, I'm on my way, I'm driving into class, and I get this alert. Chuck D, Fight the Power, new PBS documentary. And as soon as I saw that, my heart dropped. My heart sank. And it sank lower as I started to watch it. But by the time I got to the class, we had a great discussion because, and that's what I want to start with us here, that the documentary, the series that has just started nationally on PBS, and there will be spoilers for episode 1, which I'll be talking about today, and we're going to track it each week as it comes out and use it in my class, because it is doing exactly, episode 1 at least, is doing exactly what, unfortunately, I have been predicting and arguing is going to be and continues to be a problem with the depiction of this hip hop narrative, which as a subset to the narrative of US history is equally damaged, fraudulent, and working against any legit effort to make the world better. So, and it was, and to this question you raised, Leah, about my somberness, part of it is that it again is dealing with this beloved cultural expression of hip hop. It is titled Fight the Power after Chuck D's and Public Enemy's famous song, itself coming after the Isley Brothers and their Fight the Power song. It's Chuck D narrating, hosting it. The cultural hero of my generation. It's comrades of mine, as we'll come back to, appearing in this piece. And more importantly, it's the narrative that is meant to, I'm going to argue, assault the consciousness of the young people that end up in my classroom. Oh man, the Vernon philosophy is in full demand. Absolutely. I mean, it is this thing. So let me. So I want to, as I'm doing with my class, the first thing I actually asked them to do, one of the first things, because I had them, we start off with a couple things. We start off the semester with the Can't Stop, Won't Stop mixtape. That whatever I think of Jeff Chang's narrative development in the book, the mixtape is fantastic. Although, young sister last night, and I will admit this for the first time, I got to go back and just to make sure. I'm sure she's right, but I just want to get a one more fresh listen to confirm. She raised the critique that there are no women MCs in the mixtape, which is supposed to be a history. It's a mixtape history of hip hop, and it's so well done that I think I've been missing this point. Another one, the crucial blind spot that got called out. So I appreciated that critique. Want to go back and check that. And then we started, I also had them listen to an interview I did with Chang years ago and a little bit of a debate around hip hop activism, and same thing with Dr. Dawn Alyssa Fisher. So there was, and then I had actually had them read, and I assigned them to read it. I wanted them to read it, and to revisit this argument I have around C. Delores Tucker, which I'm not going to redo here today, but just as a quick recap, is just arguing that the example of this historical critique of C. Delores Tucker, a critique of her critique, that is that in the 90s, that Tucker being part of this old guard criticism of this evolving hip hop and rap music and its negative depiction of Black people and its negative impact on Black youth and its corporate control, that in an effort to defend the evolving, emerging hip hop, the cultural expression coming out of these communities, that early journalism, hip hop activism, and the current narrative that is in play around hip hop history has all been meant to defend, justify, and protect the evolution and sustenance of this art, of this cultural expression, of all its forms. But the paradox is, in so doing, these critical issues of colonialism, of capitalism, were missed. And in defending against C. Delores Tucker the right for hip hop to exist, hip hop has helped itself walk itself into the aggressive arms of the very hostile forces they were condemning Tucker as being associated with. So it is that Dr. King integrating into a burning building thing, and then out of it has been crafted this narrative that hip hop rose out of the ashes. And as the subtitle of this documentary says, changed America. So I'll link, I'll put the link back in here if anybody wants to revisit my argument around Tucker. And I think I will be coming back to it because it I think predicts accurately what is going on. So anyway, so that was so that's where we started. But so then we come to the to this documentary, or this series, Fight the Power: How Hip Hop Changed the World. I meant to say, sorry, I was reducing it to just America. How it changed the world. And if we look, continuing on with the description, Fight the Power: How Hip Hop Changed the World is an incredible narrative of struggle, triumph, and resistance that will be brought to life through the lens of an art form that has chronicled the emotions, experiences, and expressions of Black and brown communities, hip hop. In the aftermath of America's racial and political reckoning in 2020, the perspectives and stories shared in hip hop are key to understanding injustice in the US over the last half century. So PBS is arguing that this series is they're saying it's key to understanding injustice in the US. That to understand the history of this country and its injustice against Black and brown communities, you have to understand hip hop. So it's already, from my vantage point, co-opting the language, the imagery, and the history to justify the current contemporary world. Whereas we talk about here all the time, materially speaking, Black people are in no improved condition when compared really to any time. I think would be fair to say, given the relatively speaking, but certainly given to the 50-year period that we're talking about here, Black people have not evolved politically, economically, no steps forward in terms of sovereignty, are devolving economically to zero in terms of wealth by 2053. We've shown the reports that show that in terms of, again, when it comes to wealth, there can be no closing of the gap without a revolutionary intervention. So mass incarceration, I mean, on and on. What world change? So again, I think this is something we'll grapple with all semester long in my class. Here, the argument is the world, for me at least, the world changed, that the way it changed the world is more in terms of the method of updating US hegemony. Once it was realized hip hop was not something that was going to be a fad and easily dismissed, it was co-opted. It's been corrupted. And really from the very beginning, the very first rap record, Sylvia Robinson, Sugar Hill Gang, it's already a commercially formed corporate bastardization of what had been happening in the streets. So from day one, we're involved in a corrupted enterprise here. Sylvia Robinson was no revolutionary. She was looking to work and capitalize off of what was bubbling in the streets that her Blackness gave her proximity to, an advantage of her white corporate competitors. But this narrative that, again, hip hop has unwittingly, people defending hip hop have unwittingly helped to produce and sustain, I think unwittingly, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, is a major problem. It continues to be a major problem. So, all right. So as I said, spoilers and whatnot and what have you, but there was one more other thing, and I think I saw Coco in the comments already got to this point here, because it does come from PBS. So I did, take a quick revisit to my own book, I Mix What I Like, a mixtape manifesto, because though I was talking about NPR as opposed to PBS, I think it's basically the same point is being made here about, I'm making the same point about the relationship that these media have to the nation itself. So, and the point I'm getting at here, borrowing from an idea that was passed to me, that NPR plays the role, has the same relationship to the United States that Fanon said Radio Alger played to the colonized population of Algeria. And the point, as he was saying here, and as I was referencing him here, that NPR does precisely what Fanon said of Radio Alger by reminding the, quote, settler colonizer of the reality of colonial power, and by its very existence dispensing safety and serenity. So in part, what I am arguing is that this narrative of hip hop has been supported in its evolution and reproduced and redisseminated, as is the case with this latest series, in part because it reconfirms the broader national narrative that this settler colonial project is a good thing. It is a positive. And that, yes, white people who are ultimately the target audience of both the sales of this art and the distribution of this media, that even when the colonial project upon which you sit produces this level of oppression, you don't have to worry about the actual threat of a political struggle and revolutionary movement, because hip hop. And whenever there's an issue bubbling up among people that your colonial oppression is assisting and that you benefit from, we can redeploy and remind them and encourage a return to a bastardized version of the source. That is a return to your culture, a return to your symbolic and performative roots, pun intended. In this series, episode 1, they may take a radical departure in subsequent episodes. We'll see. But just continuing a little bit here, that this media provides further cover for its primary function, reassuring the settler with what Fanon calls a daily invitation not to go native, not to forget the rightfulness of his culture. Because I think a subset of all of this is that, and as they make clear, and as it is, hip hop is an extension. Well, they don't say it this way, but is an extension of African, of Black, of brown, of that Pan-African experience colonized here in the U.S. But what I'm saying is that I would frame it that way. Their frame is this is their culture, not to praise and honor and respect, but to create distance for and from the settler. Because again, the settler is the target audience. White audience, affluent white audiences are the target audience of PBS and its member donorship and all the advertising and the Archie McDaniels, whoever, all that advertise to them. They're talking to them. And they're saying, they may hear this as praise and recognition of their culture, but we're telling you, settler, that it being theirs means it's not yours, because yours is the high culture, the separate culture, the more elevated, the more civilized. Theirs is the savage. So you are right in your settler colonial place. You've done nothing wrong here that can't be corrected by a little bit of symbolic performative advance. And that's really what this whole episode 1, just to be fair, because that's all we've seen so far. But that's what they're really doing here. So, okay. So that little bit of a preamble aside, let me just get into a little bit of what happens in this thing. And it was brutal right out of the gate. How hip hop changed the world. And then I ask, how did it change it? As opposed to progress, it changed the manner or form of media, culture, and popularity against the people. So that's why I titled this, as opposed to fight the power, it's power fights the people. That's what this is representative of. And right out the gate, they give you the frame. Because what's the frame? Killer Mike. In that infamous Atlanta press conference in front of the mayor or whatever, in front of the Black business and policing and political community, crying after yet another Black man killed by the police. They don't show the part where he went into the whole thing about don't rebel and calm down and don't burn up your city and support your businesses and do all of that. What they were doing was setting the tone that Killer Mike, as an MC, as a rapper, is a representative of hip hop, proudly, as we approach the 50th anniversary, has assumed the mantle of the history, the culminating history, to stand there representing this movement in defiance against another Black man killed. But that's the hook that they left out. He was there to support Black business. He was there to support he was harm reduction, which is what I'm arguing hip hop has been turned into writ large. So it's in many ways the series is revealing, it's telling on itself. Fanon's point, the culture of the colonized is used to testify against the community. This was a perfect opening to demonstrate that point, because he's testifying before the world that hip hop is here to put a limit on the potential threat that should exist from any colonized population. So as I wrote in my notes, he's there to set the emotional tone and to falsely place hip hop as a radical progressive force. Then, of course, they go on to explicitly say that there is no Black Lives Matter. There is no Black Lives Matter protest without hip hop. And again, this is my point, as they said earlier I think in that introductory, in the intro of the piece itself, they're saying there is no hip hop. I mean, there is no Obama without hip hop. There is no Black Lives Matter without hip hop. And again, I'm arguing the same thing. Without hip hop being turned into its colonial form, we wouldn't have a Black Lives Matter. We might actually still have a Black liberation movement. And Dhoruba is right. BLM does not mean Black Lives Matter. It's Black Lives. Look, I even did it there. It's Black Liberation Movement. That was deep, right? But it's brilliant. It's beautiful, well produced. Everybody looking good, sounding good, crisp 4K, whatever, HD. But the same old narrative. It's that same old, and they get real slick with it in this first episode. Like, this is sophisticated psychological warfare. I'm going to be very interested to see if I mean, it's going to be a true testament to my teaching skills to thread this needle with my students who are already expressing that they're way more advanced politically than I'm used to giving them credit for. I'll be honest with that. So this group might get it, but it's going to be, I mean, this is going to be some work. This joint is monstrous. So then I wrote here that I made a note here saying that the same generation that fought for inclusion now wants credit for what it did, but without reflection or self-criticism. So in other words, going back to my point about my Tucker narrative, my generation, the hip hop generation that justifiably wanted to justify our existence, lost the plot. Was not politically organized sufficiently in advance, which is what led to the creation of hip hop in the first place. I mean, this is again, going back to the contradictions Fanon wrote about however many longer. There is no jazz without slavery. So the very conditions that we want to get rid of are what caused this brilliance. So, but in the process, those same conditions have put limitations on our analysis. So we fought, and I'll say I'm in that generation. I was rocking with him. I was saying FC Delores Tucker right along with everybody else, telling the elders, shut up, we here. But we missed the plot. Because as we're fighting for justification, we lost track of what the colonial process, what the capitalist process does in the process. And here we are. So now that same generation is now the one producing this documentary in this series saying, we gave you this world, but we want credit for it. And I'm saying, we need to be held up and criticized for this. I don't want credit for this. I don't want blame for this. Is what it should be, if anything. So I don't want, and I'm not saying hip hop is to blame for this world. I'm not saying my generation is to blame for this, but I am saying that if anything, I definitely don't want credit for it. And this series wants us to take credit. It's a 50th birthday celebration. And then if you saw, I was gonna do a separate, but if you just, I can't even do it because, and I admit my bias here is inhibiting me. But if you watch Chuck D, I watched the clip of him going on Stephen Colbert's show to promote this series. I mean, it's painful to see where, you know, to see it what should be the leading critique of this world is now wanting to take credit for it as if something good is happening here. So I said regifting the old narrative. Then they do this whole thing of saying, but if you want to understand, because again, as I showed you in that intro, in their summary, they're saying that they're connecting this to political struggle. So they show us Dr. King and John F. Kennedy and Malcolm X and Robert F. Kennedy, that famous, that set of four who get assassinated, and because of that woke people up. Grandmaster Caz talk about that, and Melly Mel talking about that showed us what Black people's relationship is to society. And that's why he gave us the message. And I think I'll come back to this. I want to stay in order of my notes, but I was like, so what this series is saying is, like I said, whenever there's a problem, white folks, settlers, don't get too scared, because all you're gonna have to deal with is some music, some angry music. Because they skip right over everything. Of course, you don't get any of the real politics of King. You don't get any of the real discussion of any of these people. You just get this whole thing of John F. Kennedy was good, which is, Robert F. Kennedy was good, and because they got assassinated, the world fell apart. And here comes hip hop, because they just gloss over Black Power. You get that quick clip of Stokely. No discussion of him as Kwame. No discussion of his actual analysis, even at the time. Just a quick, you see him speaking, which is more than you got in Selma, by the way. But of course, nothing of his warning that Black visibility is not Black Power. And then they just skip right into Jesse Jackson, Farrakhan. So I wrote here Black Power to Farrakhan and Jesse Jackson. Just skipped over all of that. No COINTELPRO, no state response to the Black Power era, because all we're getting was stuff happened in hip hop. They show Rap Brown, but as I wrote here, but they don't show you that this is what I wrote. Show Rap Brown, but don't show you that Jamil Al-Amin is still locked up. I even had to write that in all caps. All caps. They're doing it again. We'll show you that symbol, which is still more than they did even with Selma. Show you that symbol, but none of what happened though. But what happened? Because again, the narrative is things are good now. Hip hop made the world better. So it doesn't work if we focus on the fact that Mutulu just got out. Russell just got out and died. That Mumia is still locked up. That Jamil Al-Amin, who you showed on screen, is still locked up. The narrative falls apart then. It's super irritating. I can't front. It's super irritating. It's super irritating. And now, see, don't frame it that way. We're not banging on anybody. We're criticizing. It's a critique. I do not agree with this product. And I'm saying it's painful. But I don't agree with it. And teaching a class, trying to be supportive of activism, I feel like it works against what we're trying to do. The analysis is wrong, and historically, I mean, I think it's demonstrably wrong. I actually think my essay, I read it again. I mean, it's one of the few things I've written that I think is I'm really actually proud of, straight up. What I did in that short space, I think is actually very right. All right, let me keep going. Then they bring us the last poets, of course. But not much, again, not much added beyond that. But then I said, but no discussion of state response or COINTELPRO. This is an enormous gap in the narrative. So that's what I'm saying. Because part of what they're trying to say is the aftermath of King and all these other assassinations was this powerful rise. But that Black power then becomes what Nixon wanted it to be, something symbolic and empty and supportive of Black capitalism and capitalism in the state itself. Then they bring back Nelson George again as another talking head, legendary writer, et cetera, and so forth. But it's the same thing. And he sits there and he's just sitting there, oh, everything was amazing back in the day, and it was amazing. Then they bring us Hassan Jeffries is a talking head in this joint. I guess young hip hop generation-ish. He's supposed to be, but he's the latest wave of neoliberal spokespeople for the history. We get DMC from Run DMC is in there. I was going to say, you're going to have Run in there. That's going to be a problem. You going to have Russell? Is Russell Simmons going to show up in this series? Or are we going to skip over all that? What are they going to do with Africa Bambaataa? Are we going to skip over all that too? Because again, you're trying to tell, you're clearly, episode 1 is everything is good. Hip hop saved the world, changed the world. So what are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with that in this series? I don't know yet. Maybe they got a way of dealing with it. So far, they're skipping over key components here. So if the response to the assassinations of our leaders was a little bit of Black power that seems to have only culminated in the rise of hip hop, what are we saying? Well, of course, it has to be displayed that way or discussed that way, because the goal is, again, to conclude that everything is good now, or at least on a better path now. We got a Black president, we got more diversity, multicultural world, they've tanned America, all this stuff. They bring back all these really disturbing tropes. But then there's no repression, there's no state repression, there's no ongoing political struggle. There was apparently no real political struggle then either, because all that was waiting for was this hip hop to emerge. So then I make a point that, again, we get some reference to the Black is Beautiful movement, but that's the sort of the extent, again, the symbolic elements of Black power. No discussion of socialism, internationalism, armed struggle, no BLA, no Sekou Touré, no Nkrumah Touréism, none of that. It's just symbolic. So that's why I'm saying Nelson George, everything was amazing, brother, the dashikis and the picks and the afros. Go back and look what we said this week on Guerrilla Intellectual University. Guerrilla Intellectual University. This discussion of symbolism versus, I mean, this is an extension of that. It's crazy. So then I made the point here that they give us a quick clip of Shirley Chisholm, but no Assata. They show us a clip of Shirley Chisholm in 1972. That's in the heat of Assata's struggle. No reference to Assata, though. And then they give us Nixon, but only to talk about the drug war and its negative impact on Black communities, not the fact that he himself said Black capitalism is Black power. Because again, that would mess up the narrative, which is, in this case, as I said in my piece about Tucker, Dan Charn is calling this an American capitalist success story. So if this is a success story of American capital, you can't have a critique of Nixon promoting Black capitalism. He just becomes a boogeyman for the war on drugs. And the response we get from that, according to this series, is graffiti. And they even bring us the young dude from Style Wars and what was the other joint? The Style Wars and what was that other one? He's in this, talking about graffiti and how you could tag a train and get more views when it runs throughout the whole city than people get on social media today. They literally do this in the piece. It's like in this episode, it's a repeating occurrence. Something bad happens in the world is collapsing, the economy is collapsing. Here comes the B-boy. Black people are oppressed, here comes the DJ. Nixon comes into power, but here comes graffiti. And I wrote here, it's as if every bit or form of repression was only responded to by hip hop. And then KRS is in there talking about graffiti as the greatest tool and power of propaganda. So you can't even put graffiti on the train anymore. They literally painted it over and scraped it off and erased that history. So if that was the greatest propaganda tool and a representative of power, then again, what are we saying? Because it doesn't exist anymore. Graffiti as a core component or element of hip hop isn't even barely recognized anymore. Certainly not practiced much anymore. Not as a component of hip hop, and not as some accessory to radical political activity. So what are we talking about? And then the very next scene, I don't know exactly. I mean, this is again, I straight up, a personal struggle. But right on the very next scene is my ace, my girl, my comrade, Rosa Clemente. And I literally typed, Rosa, oh shit. And I said, because and again, I don't know how they're going to carry the rest of the series, but in this episode, she's there for quick clips about the conditions of the Bronx and how wonderful it is the way hip hop responded. But as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking this is a very personal. I felt like I'm watching yet again my comrade and the broader movement get captured. And I was wondering, does she felt? I haven't talked to her about it, but does she felt as Zach Kondo did about his Netflix appearance in the Malcolm X documentary? Does she feel a similar way that there's going to be an abuse of what was done with her interview? Because at this point, there's no discussion of her decades of writing and critique of hip hop and its patriarchy, its racial reductionism, its capitalism, its corporate consolidation and dominance, abuse against the people. There's no discussion of the hip hop activist community or even the Hip Hop National Political Convention. None of that was referenced yet in this first episode. So I don't know if it's coming, but this first episode was brutal. There was no discussion of the hip hop cops, hip hop rap and tell pro, no discussion of Smack Fest. Are we supposed to, at a certain age, forget that monstrosity imposed on us? Where I know Rosa was one of the leading figures condemning all of that. So maybe that contradiction is going to get dealt with in some way at some point in the series. I don't know, but so far there's no sign of it. Because again, the narrative is engagement with the corporate world is good. It's a takeover. So if there's a critique of corporate consolidation and the dominance over the airwaves and all this stuff that she and people like me to a lesser extent were involved with for years. And it's not like we won that battle. So this is not, so it's like I don't feel a victory lap. So maybe this is good. So this I think is good. And I have talked about this with Rose and others over the years. Like I think it's good that I'm in a community of those who don't get invited. I'm not saying I deserve it, but I'm saying it's good that I don't get invited. It makes it easier to perform the critique that I think is necessary. I don't know if I would have said no. I might have. I don't know. But I get it. So don't invite me. I just want to put that out there to whoever's considering a future documentary of this kind. Don't ask me to participate. Make it easier for me to stay outside in the margins and able to give my honest analysis, because it would and to not participate, because who knows if I would accept the invitation. It's hard. I get it. This one probably not though. PBS, I probably would have skipped that one. But my point is, anyway, one thing that I like that they included in this is something that I think people who keep talking about Black Wall Street and that history need to make use of. myself included. And again, shout out to Two Black and in our collective work on this issue. But they talk about the building of the Cross Bronx Expressway, which cut the Bronx in half, created the white flight and the class flight, and created worsening conditions out of which hip hop would emerge. And that was sort of exactly what would eventually destroy Black Wall Street in the 40s, the building of highways and cutting off the community and creating further divides. It wasn't just the white vigilante violence of 20, 30 years earlier, which had been overcome and rebuilt. It's that more complicated federal supported, state supported policy than it is some silly, not silly, because it's the violence is not silly, but it's not just the rednecks that do all of this. So then they go back and recount some of that history: destruction of the schools, destruction of the music programs that lead people out away from bands and live instrumentation and into to DJing. But then they do the same thing. But then here comes disco. And even though there was the white disco, Black people turned disco into something else and had their own discos. So it's like, again, when things go wrong, here comes hip hop. And as I wrote here, no political economy, no political struggle, no discussion of capital and repression, no discussion of reorganization of the corporations and industry, no discussion of politics of media or popularity. All of that's erased. And all we get is disco showed up, and then here comes Kool Herc and that famous initial party that is said to have sparked it all. But then here comes Reagan. They kind of leave it in there like Jimmy Carter was some sort of a like the good guy. You know, that's always sort of the narrative. And he, you know, again, relative to Reagan, maybe, but, you know, come on now, let's not overdo it. But then they quickly go into Reagan. And again, for people of my age, my generation, we get it. He is the boogeyman. This Trump stuff, Trump is soft. Trump is light work. Reagan was the real thug gangster representative of the political world, right? But, and again, he comes in talking that whiteness, you know, Reagan was good for that. Like, I don't care about you. I don't care about you. So that's why when he died during my wedding, but the response to Reagan, here comes Melly Mel and the Message. And that radicalism came back. And that's sort of how it goes. That's episode 1. Nightmare oppression of Black and brown communities, ignoring the political organization and the state repression of those movements. That's all erased, because the acceptable response to that oppression is what's being promoted here: hip hop. So again, don't worry, settlers, again, who are the target audience of this. Don't worry, settlers, because we're going to continue to oppress these folks. But aside from a few protests every so often, all you really have to deal with is the newest cultural expressive force. So that's it. That's all I have for episode 1. I don't know if there are any particular questions or comments. Please repost them into the chat if you want to. We can take a couple minutes and deal with it. Otherwise, I'll continue to watch this, and we'll be dealing with this in my class all you know, the next few weeks, however many episodes of this that there are. But and I promise you, like, you know, I think it goes without saying that if they take a radical turn or any turn toward improvement in subsequent episodes, I will happily come back and praise them for it. But they got a pretty big hole to dig out of from episode 1. This joint, they're just going to beat us down with this narrative. Apparently, they're just going to keep beating us down with this narrative. And as I was saying to my students last night, they're targeting you. That yes, the real audience for this is the settler colonial. This is a PBS product, but the messaging, the broader reverberating messaging, is meant to target these young Black kids who are supposed to look up at their conditions, which are worsening by the day and as bad as it was in the 70s, if not worse. And they're supposed to look at that and then look up, not at the Panthers, not at the BLA, not at Malcolm, and not at Dr. King for real. They're supposed to look up and see that there was hip hop. And so I don't even know if we're going to get, I mean, they got, you know, Fat Joe is a talking head in this. LL Cool J is a talking head in this. There's a sister in here who I got to look her up. I don't know who she is. She's talking in there more than Rosa, and not, I think, adding much. So I don't know who she is. She the only one in there that I don't know who she is, I think. But my point is, it's the same kind of talking head, same sort of narration of the same sort of stories with literally some of the same clips that you've seen before of these figures, and none of the you know. Yeah, my bad, Ricky. Yeah, you know, can't go for hours every time. Yeah, it's on PBS. It's on PBS. Check your, you know, and you know, you can log in and it's already online. I think they're also sending it out through Amazon as well. Thank you, Coco. Appreciate that. And Coco, stay tuned. She's gonna be with us next week, right? Next Tuesday, right? No. When is it? It's coming up. I got it on the calendar somewhere, but we got our thing coming up here somewhere. Talking about Walter Rodney, another figure whose politics are ignored in this as well. So anyway, all right, good people. Again, I appreciate those who were able to make it here live and those who will see this later. Peace and welcome to you as well. Yeah, they made. Anyway, if you got more to say, definitely
put it in the comments.
And you know, anyway, like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, invite the critique. I'm happy to be, you know. Speaking of critique, stay tuned. More coming on this Gerald Horne stuff. Very interesting criticisms. I can't wait to get into that more too. So anyway, but we're staying away from hopping bobs today. So all right, good people. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like It throughout the platform. Back tomorrow with Earn Your Liberation, the fellas and the crew. And I think Diedrich Muhammad is joining us tomorrow to talk about a new report about my hometown in the sense of where I grew up as opposed to where I was actually born. But this Columbia, Maryland got a new economic report. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, bunch more coming up here in the platform. Do all the things. Catch you next time. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred used to say. Fred Hampton, that is, who is also exiled in this PBS joint, by the way, so far. But, you know, like he said, peace. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.